So, Greg, Hunter Biden, we should remind folks, was found guilty by a jury on gun-related charges. He pleaded guilty to tax offenses. So I wonder what you make of President Biden's argument that this was somehow a miscarriage of justice.
Well, that argument has been made by others. Some have argued that a different defendant, perhaps one named Hunter Smith, would have been approached and handled differently by DOJ, given the same sort of facts. But I think at the end of the day, that argument is a loser. Look, this is problematic for two obvious reasons. As has been mentioned, the president repeatedly himself and through surrogates has said that he would not do this. And then, of course, he turned around and did it. So that's not a great look. And then secondly, to criticize DOJ as he's doing it, also not the best way to explain a decision like this. Granted, the prosecutor in this case was the Trump U.S. attorney in Delaware, but he also became Merrick Garland's special counsel. So it's really hard for, I think, the president or anybody else to accuse prosecutorial or alleged prosecutorial misconduct in this case. So you put it all together, and despite the fact that the last 4 years for President Biden in many ways have been very good, very productive, a success story for the country in many ways, this is not a great way to be going out for him. And as we see, he's receiving criticism from both sides of the aisle, and it's unfortunate.
Mike just played that video of the First Lady, and she did answer a question that she didn't have to, in saying that she supported the pardon of her son. I do want to say, as she was leaving the room, she was asked another question about whether or not she had spoken to her son, Hunter Biden. That she chose not to answer, and she left the room. So we don't know the answer to that. But let me follow up on something you said, Greg. And I wonder, do you think that leaning into his role as a father, there was a way for Joe Biden to grant this pardon without suggesting a selective and unfair prosecution?
Well, there certainly was, and one relatively simple way to do it, and I think something that many people expected, was that he would not pardon Hunter Biden, but he would perhaps commute any sentence that he would receive. That would be, in effect, a way of acknowledging his guilt, acknowledging his guilty plea in one case and the jury's verdict in the other case, but ensuring that he wouldn't have to spend any time in prison. That would also have been criticized, no doubt, but a full pardon, and as broad as this pardon was, albeit within the president's constitutional discretion, obviously, is what is raising eyebrows and probably could have been avoided, while at the same time doing something to help his son move past this chapter in his life.
So, Ali, what more are we hearing from Capitol Hill, particularly from Democrats?
Well, look, lawmakers coming back to town today, Chris, after their Thanksgiving recess. And certainly we've heard from some Democrats online, on social media platforms, but also some who have spoken out saying that they understand the contours of this from a family perspective. Many of these lawmakers actually know Joe Biden. He was ubiquitous on Capitol Hill for decades. Certainly, Mike spoke to the family dynamics so beautifully because of his depth of knowledge here. But for lawmakers, they have that knowledge too, of the unique role that Hunter Biden plays in Biden's universe. And so certainly they understand the context of it, but that doesn't mean that they are all out in agreement. And certainly some have been silent. But here's, for example, Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly speaking about this pardon. Watch.
I have a mixed response. As a father myself, and as someone who knows Joe Biden, I can sympathize with his perspective that his son was, subject to vigilante justice. But having said that, what other father in America has the power to pardon his son or daughter if they're convicted of a crime? I really think we have to revisit the pardon power in the Constitution. And at the very least, I think we've got to circumscribe it so that you don't get to pardon relatives, even if you believe passionately they're innocent or that their cause is just.
So perhaps a new legislative assignment there from the congressman for the next Congress, as this power could be looked at. But certainly from a political perspective, I imagine more Democrats, once they are back here on the Hill and within range of reporters, microphones and recorders, I imagine many more of them are going to have to make that juxtaposition that you saw from Connolly there, saying that while they might understand, they have concerns about what the implications could be here for both law enforcement norms and also also the way and the role of a president of the United States. Certainly, even if you think back to the ways that Hunter Biden has been a central figure here on Capitol Hill from an investigations perspective, Democrats were always quite clear that they thought that Hunter should not be treated any differently. I imagine that's going to start coming out in their statements and their reactions.
Elise, I think it's also true that, obviously Joe Biden's political career is over. There are no, per se, immediate implications for him. But for Democrats, Peter Baker put it this way. Mr. Biden's pardon will make it harder for Democrats to defend the integrity of the Justice Department and stand against Mr. Trump's unapologetic plans to use it for political purposes. Is that the danger here?
Chris, I completely agree. Joe Biden has left the American rule of law system in a perilous position on the eve of the transfer of power. He has proclaimed and professed to care about protecting and upholding institutions. And with this move, it just looks corrupt. It looks like he cares more about using his political power to protect the powerful, in this case, his son. And it's, this is just in a nutshell exactly why so many Americans think the system is rigged and politicians are corrupt, and they conflate what Biden did and Trump did, whether right or wrong. That's why one of the many reasons that you saw the election go the way it did for Donald Trump, and Americans were willing, after all of Trump's convictions, to give him another chance just because they think the whole system is rotten. And I also would just be shocked if President Trump now does not give blanket pardons to the January 6th rioters for what they did on January 6th.
Well, he has suggested that he's going to give widespread pardons for the January 6th rioters. But we're going to talk about Kash Patel, nominated Elise or picked by Donald Trump to head the FBI in just a minute. But he is among those who have made it very clear on the Republican side that they would like to go after not just Hunter Biden, but they have questions about the Biden family overall. They have suggested very publicly that it's a crime family without, of course, anything to back it up. But with these two developments coming right after another, the pick of Kash Patel, the pardon of Hunter Biden, do you think, what do you think the message is for the American people about the rule of law, about the distribution of justice in this country?
Chris, I think that the elite play by a different rule book. That's the answer that Americans get from this episode. And it's incredibly disturbing that our justice system is now seen as a political weapon against the other side, depending on who's in power. It reeks of banana republic style governance, and it's a sad chapter. And I really hope that there's going to be some course corrective, but I'm not exceedingly optimistic.
Greg, do you see any possibility of course correction here?
Well, this is it's an unfortunate reality we face right now. What this, I think, more than anything does is it gives critics on the right a process foul to point to, something to say, well, see, this just proves what we've been saying about Biden and the Democrats. And it gives those critics another what about. It was what about her emails. Now it's going to be what about Joe Biden's pardon. So it doesn't help the situation. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how DOJ operates, how the FBI operates. But this sort of episode doesn't help clarify those misconceptions. So we'll see.